Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Welcome to the podcast. Joining me today is Tosin Agbabiaka of Octopus Ventures, who I met backstage at Finovate Europe in Berlin. We had a really good conversation there. He was great up on stage as well. Tosin, pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Pleasure to be here, Greg. Thank you so much for having me. Great to chat with you again.
Yeah. So to start, if you could just give us a little bit of background, quick introduction on yourself and your work with Octopus Ventures to get things going.
Of course. So I'm a fintech-focused early-stage investor with Octopus Ventures. I'm based in our New York office. And to tell you a bit more about Octopus Ventures is an early-stage UK and US venture capital firm. And we invest in the C to Series A range. And our focus is on supporting pioneers that are looking to change the world. And what we specifically mean by that is that we look for founders who are looking to reimagine the futures of money, health, and deep tech. As such, our investment team is divided into sort of three concentrations, and I happen to be a member of the Future of Money pod.
It was really interesting meeting backstage. I felt right away that we were on the same page about a lot of things. Anybody who's talked to me for any length of time knows that financial inclusion is something that I care a great deal about. In talking with you after 30 or 60 seconds, it was clear that it was something you were really passionate about as well, which is something you don't see a lot from the venture capital community, or at least I haven't met too many in that position. But can you start by talking a little bit about why financial inclusion is something you're so passionate about?
Yeah. So besides, of course, focusing on fintech in my work today, my personal and previous professional exploits sort of give a stronger sense of why financial inclusion matters to me. So I was born and raised in Nigeria and then moved to the United States when I was 12. So I've had the experience of seeing a space that lacks access to a number of financial products and services. And I've seen other spaces where there is seemingly a bounty of financial products and services. On the professional side, I've worked previously on migration and economic policy and human rights in the European context. I've had the experience of living in and working in some of the most interesting financial experiences of our time, one of which was working in Athens, Greece during the Eurozone crisis. And so these experiences have really shaped and formed what I believe is a need for people, for the public at large, to have increased access, quality, and affordability of financial products and services.
So, I did a little bit of LinkedIn stalking on you, and I looked up some of your history, which is impressive, by the way, I have to say. But it looks like, the move to venture capital is a relatively recent one for you. And I suppose in some sense it might feel a little bit like switching teams. Can you talk about how being on the venture capital side of things has changed your perspective?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't really think of it as much as switching teams as I think about just understanding a different type of financial inclusion solution, right? So on one hand, there's some financial inclusion solutions, and maybe even I would say public services that by themselves can't run a profit or have to be subsidized or financed by other means because they themselves wouldn't generate a profit. And I've spent a lot of time working in nonprofits and in the government, and so have learned about those. What venture capital affords me a different opportunity now to see the marriage of sort of profit-generating enterprises with also that financial inclusion focus, right? So this is a new skill, a new muscle, I guess I would say I'm flexing, a new way of thinking about how to provide financing to grow these financial inclusion solutions.
I think that's really interesting. I think being able to keep that consistency in terms of the passion and bring it to a different type of organization, I would imagine, has been difficult at times, but also probably very rewarding. But let's take a step back and come to a higher level question, which is a relatively simple one, which I'm sure has a complex answer. How does a venture capital firm look at a company that focuses on financial inclusion? It's obviously going to be different than how we would look at it from the standpoint of a press or kind of a nonprofit or social good type of angle. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So as I alluded to, not all financial inclusion solutions or companies will fit the VC model. So we first of all ask ourselves the question, and we ask the companies the question, right? Like, do you understand the VC model? Do you understand the expectations that come with taking venture capital? Because venture capital as a means of financing is more expensive than debt, and it's definitely more expensive than non-dilutive capital, which is a form of capital that a lot of financial inclusion companies might have access to, right? So once you have determined that you are a company that fits the VC model, the other questions we ask are, is there a large, sizable market opportunity? And is there a similarly outsized vision that the founders of the company has tackling this market? The second is the company progressed and close to a point where there is going to be significant growth or a significant growth inflection? That kind of growth is perhaps the only kind of growth that can justify the expectations that VC capital comes with. And the third is there founder market fit, as some might call it? Is there a marriage between the skills, the experience, and the ambition of the founder and the market and the challenge the founder is looking to tackle? And then the fourth is, has there been demonstrated experience in tackling other forms of ideas or innovations in the past that the founder can reference or that we can reference the founder has? And that doesn't necessarily have to come in having founded a VC-backed company in the past, but other proxies, whether it be experience growing some other idea in a different space or growing ideas within a pre-existing established company. Those kinds of things are some of the proxies we look for in determining whether a company is indeed backable.
What's so fascinating about that response, and I suspected it was going to be complicated, but it is actually a really complicated answer. And I think this gets to the heart of something which a lot of us in fintech face when we look at financial inclusion. We think, obviously, these are good things. We want to make improvements in people's lives in these areas. Why isn't this happening? And to hear the way you talk about it, it really is a very complex equation. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And I think it's not, a matter of motivation. It's not a matter of desire, but it's a matter of finding that kind of perfect fit, the person who can tick all of those boxes, the companies that are well positioned to actually succeed there. Now, I want to take a slightly different tack with this next question, because I think some people still look at financial inclusion as something akin to charity. And while it is certainly something, that has social good, there's obviously a lot more to it than that. But let's pretend, hypothetically, that there was a bank in the world that didn't care about social good at all, cared only about its profits and its bottom. I know, it's hard to believe.
Hypothetically, yes.
Hypothetically, let's say, I've heard this kind of thing might happen. If there was a bank that fit that bill and they're focused only on their own revenue and profits and growth, what would you tell them to look at in financial inclusion that would help deliver some of those goals?
Yeah, so I think the challenge or the problem has been that financial inclusion is often thought out or framed in the eyes, or from the eyes, I should say, of the recipient, the person to be included. But if you look at it differently, financial inclusion is effectively opening new markets for companies to sell their products or sell their services to an expanded group of customers, right? And so if you think about expansion of the market for a bank or for any other potential company can operate in so many different ways. Geographically, for example, when we think about just selling products in the United States to the coasts, the coastal elites, as we've come to hear so much, there are other spaces, the South, the Midwest, maybe non-urban locations that also can be included as in thinking about selling financial products and services. Target demographics, expansion of target demographics is another important way of thinking about this. So the elderly, for example, the unbanked, perhaps even the underbanked, those with access to banks or capital, but without the services actually that are targeted towards them. And of course, ethnically diverse groups. Those are examples of other target demos to focus on. The type of customer is another way that a bank can think of financial inclusion working for them, right? So not just large enterprises or small, or a single customer can be the focus, but also small businesses in, as I mentioned before, geographically diverse areas is another way of expanding your market. And then of course the function, right? Fintechs recently have thought so much about, providing investment opportunities or access to new checking and savings accounts to certain types of customers. But what about expanding creditworthiness or the means of assessing creditworthiness of customers, or increasing access to capital or lowering the cost of capital to SMEs? like those new functions can unlock new markets for banks, fintechs, and other companies also looking to capture new markets or expand their existing markets here.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I think we look at financial inclusion and there's this kind of, it's easy to file it away as being something which, affects a group of quote unquote others, right? Somebody who is, either racially or geographically different from myself. But if you start to really expand the definition of financial inclusion, you look at how many different groups inside the United States, outside the United States, and all over the world are missing something or missing access to basic banking services, you realize it's not something that is just appears on those lines, and expanding access to those groups is massive. We've actually seen quite a few companies in recent years at Finovate who've come and managed to win Best of Show with solutions that really target these markets. Money Amigo had a really good one where they were looking particularly at the Spanish-speaking population in the United States and creating a mobile-first bank for them that helped them to not have to go into a bank branch where they were frequently, subjected to some forms of racism, or they weren't confident in their English speaking abilities. And so they were kind of intimidated out of the banking system, regardless of the fact that they actually had money that they needed to invest. They had, credit worthiness that they should have been able to exploit. And that prevented this group of people from being able to get, credit cards, car loans, mortgages, things like this, which we all kind of take for granted to some extent. And then, of course, when you start to talk about people like, groups like the elderly who have many needs which aren't being met, or you look at low income people in different states, there are a lot of different ways that you can think about financial inclusion. So this has been, I think, a really interesting one. And I really do appreciate your thoughts. That bell means we are out of time, but I would encourage you, if you are interested in learning more about Tosin, look him up. You'll see, as I did, he's a very impressive individual, and I hope you get the opportunity to hear him speak at some point, whether that's at a future Finovate or not. There are a lot of really interesting things that he has to say. So for anybody interested in learning more about this, feel free to reach out to us at podcast@finovate.com. We'll see if we can make a connection for you. Tosin, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much, Greg. It's such a pleasure.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.